Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. LarryG here. I am joined by my partner Tom O'Loughlin and Michael Oretsky. We are hosting the South Florida Industrial Real Estate Podcast and excited for this episode. We're going to be talking about cooler and freezer space in South Florida and what's going on in that market, which is something that there's not a ton of data on. So if you're interested in the space, keep watching because we're going to drop some really interesting information for you. So Mike, I'll start with you. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about, rents or build out costs for cooler freezer space?
Yeah. So, I mean, the TI costs associated with really any build out is something we've been tracking very closely lately. I mean, through 2025 and into 2026, basically every deal we're doing has some sort of build out associated with it. We've had a huge influx of these cooler freezer uses, which we've priced out 100 different ways. And I mean, to put a cooler freezer infrastructure into a dry warehouse, you're on the low side, $150, on the high side, $250 a foot. And to put a number value on that, for a 10,000 square foot cooler, you're at over $2 million. So it's been a challenge for obviously the landlords as well as the tenants to figure out how we're going to structure these deals around one, what the landlord's willing to contribute, what the tenant's willing to contribute for a lease, and how that's amortized over the term. All that to be said is that all that does to buildings with existing infrastructure, the rents are going through the roof. So, what we're seeing is even on older product, older cooler freezers may be less functional than really they'd like it. There's a huge value to it. There's a huge demand for it because these tenants who are in this space, obviously they need it. They can't go and operate out of a dry facility. So they're paying up for it. There's very little on the market that has the existing infrastructure. And I mean, there's huge value in it. So something we're tracking closely, and I think is just going to continue because the price to do these TIs are not coming down.
Super interesting. And Tom, I'll kick it to you in a second, but to install a freezer, forget about it. It's not even going to happen because you're ripping out the floors and it's insane. It's highly, highly unlikely someone's going to convert a dry distribution building into a freezer these days. But even for the cooler space, like you said, you're talking about hundreds of dollars a foot, millions of dollars for tens of thousands of square feet. It is not doable. And I remember the days not too long ago, we were just talking about this, where it was $60 a foot for cooler and $80 a foot for freezer. It feels like that was like yesterday, but of course it wasn't. So Tom, why don't you piggyback off that and give us some of your insights?
Yeah, I mean, no, 100% the cost is something. I mean, I think another thing that is confusing about the freezer cooler market is what I run into is all the tenants need something different.
Yep.
So dry warehouse, you can spec.
Yep.
Cooler freezer, this guy needs a chiller. This guy's got an ammonia system. This guy's got Freon. This person needs a blast freezer. This one's cooler. This one's, there's just so many dynamics that you see the more sophisticated users just come in and buy themselves a building and, do it once and do it right how they want it done. The rest of the market that leases third-party space, it's very challenging to on spec to go build out a freezer cooler component and then go get it leased, and it's very challenging too to adjust the rate accordingly to go do box inside of a box. So landlords are kind of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Right.
And then the cooler equipment itself just gets destroyed every 10 years and you're having to go back through it and throw everything away and start from scratch, or you get in this big argument between tenant and landlord, who's maintaining it. I didn't inherit it new. It was already gently used or past its useful life. So there's a lot of issues with it. Obviously, there's certain submarkets, there's a lot of food users in Broward, South Palm Beach. Obviously, you get into Miami and the Flower District and the perishables. There's huge users in Airport West and that area. So obviously, we have a large install base, but you'd think there'd be more speculative development of it. But I think it's just so challenging to figure out what to build, what to deliver. We've seen a handful of landlords provide different specs within a building, maybe not take it fully there, but maybe put the basic infrastructure in. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think there's just too many variables to get a trend line going on hey, this is what we're going to deliver on a speculative basis. So because of that, you're dealing with a lot of class B, A-, B, C type buildings that just get reused by that group of the section of the marketplace. So I don't have an answer for it, But like to your guys' point, it's doubled, if not tripled in cost. So I think
Right.
it's only going to get more challenging as we move forward.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't see spec freezer development happening at any kind of scale. Maybe some onesies and twosies here or there across the country, but I don't see that happening ever again, maybe, just because of the really intense cost of delivering, especially a freezer building. So there's been one freezer building delivered down here in our market on truly on spec, and it was a great success. And that was amazing to see that go down and watch that happen. That was awesome. But it's just such an undertaking, and it's such a hyper specific category of tenant. As you said, each tenant has very unique requirements for their business, and every single company is different. So it's impossible to build something to meet the entire market, because the entire market is hyper specific, even more so than I would say industrial outdoor storage tenants, which are also hyper specific in terms of the depth of the building and the amount of land they need and the functionality. I would say, like, out of all the categories of industrial real estate, cooler freezer is the most challenging to build to in the United States. So that's a really good observation and very interesting. At the same time, as you both alluded to, the costs going up as much as they has created this incredible rise in rents for the existing install base. And while we've got a ton of buildings down here that have cooler and freezer infrastructure, it's probably only like 2 or 3% of the entire install, maybe 5 at the most. So you're talking about just a couple million feet that a lot of it is owned by the businesses that function that operate out of there, and the rest is institutionally owned. Very, very little of it is privately owned by private investors. So, because it's controlled by the owner users and by the institutions, there's almost nothing to go around. There's never more than 1 or 2 or 3 vacancies at a time between Dade and Broward, which are the 2 largest industrial markets in South Florida. And, right now we've got a building in Fort Lauderdale that's available. That's a cooler building. And we've got a building in Miami Gardens that's available. That's true freezer. And I mean, there's almost no other options. Everything else that I've seen that's marketed is Class C, low clear height, just really rough, not functional, old stuff. And then there's another building in Miami that's also available around 100,000 feet, but it doesn't have any of the infrastructure built in. It's just got the floors in. If a freezer tenant or a cooler tenant were to come in there, all that equipment would have to be ordered, which they can do. That's fine. But in terms of like ready to go, available today, 50-ish thousand foot space, we're the only team in the entire market that has that available right now. And the rents are mid-20s net, plus electric. And that's the new sort of asking price in South Florida for any kind of a freezer space. So you've got cooler space from, let's call it 18 net plus electric, all the way up to freezer space in the mid to even high 20s, potentially triple net plus electric. I mean, you're grossing up into the 30s for like the best of the best. And that's incredible. Like that has not happened down here.
Yeah, well into the 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a weird dynamic with cooler and freezer space. Like, I don't know how much more of it we actually need in the marketplace. Yes, there's always people out looking for it, but like, obviously there's some additional capacity that's always needed because some of the existing inventory is just disintegrating into thin air, becomes unuseful because of clear height or a functionality or stuff like that. But like, if you delivered 10 million extra square feet, I don't think it would all get leased.
Right.
Like, I don't think there's that big of a backup in demand because twofold. There's a ton of consolidation going on in the food business. Like the big aggregators, the huge Fortune 500s are buying up all the little meat purveyors and seafood purveyors and kind of like making like their overall, they're going to supply A to Z. Like they're aggregators kind of in the food business. And you still have your niche guys, but like, I don't think there's a ton of cooler freezer users that haven't found South Florida yet.
Right.
So like a lot of people are like, a lot of them are here. Yes, they want maybe some modern facilities, or they're going to grow from 40 to 60 or 60 to 100. But I don't think there's a couple million square feet feet of tenancy, like all like looking down at the tip of Florida being like, you know what, hey, we haven't thought about those 7, 8, 9 million people down there. Maybe we should bring them some food.
Right.
Like, I think they're here.
Right.
Or if you look the other way, like flower provider importers are not like, hey, we should use MIA to transport our cargo into the United States. Like, it's an established, mature supply chain. So yes, I do think there's need for some new product, but I don't think it's millions of square feet in South Florida.
Totally. I totally agree with that.
And especially at the price point you have to deliver it at, the new stuff.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. It makes a lot of sense. One of the smartest things I heard a developer say a couple of years ago was if you wanted to deliver freezer product into our market or any market, frankly, but especially ours, I think it would be really intelligent for some of the builders out there, especially if it's like a smaller building and they want to do a test case, to deliver a building without the floors. If you just deliver a shell without the floors, if a freezer tenant does come along, you could just insulate the floors and throw them in, and it doesn't take that long to build out the floors. So once you have the floors insulated, at least for freezer space, ordering the equipment is not that big of a deal. Yes, it's very expensive, but it's not going to take you a year to get the equipment. It'll come quickly. So if you ever wanted to have a little fun in the market and put up a 30,000 or 50,000 foot building, just leave the floors out, call us to lease it for you. That would be the wise decision. And we'll go find some freezer tenants for your little spec building and do a little test case. I think that would be a fun little adventure for someone to take on. But yeah, in terms of, lease rates, install, vacancy, it's all very interesting. And we're a very dynamic market. I will say, on our building in Miami Gardens, we've got a ton of interest of all categories. I can't even count how many times I've gotten a call for 10 or 15,000 feet. It is insane. And these are real companies that are doing real business. They're in the fish distribution business, meat, chicken, everything you could possibly imagine. I get lots of calls for production space, which you need floor drains for, and ideally you have a blast freezer as well. We don't have that in our listing, but I get lots of calls for production. You sold a building not too long ago that was for meat production.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Like, there's a lot of and to my point earlier about the tenancy, there's a lot of small niche players.
Yes.
But you're not going to go out and build a spec building based on a bunch of small niche player localized credit guys.
Right.
When you can just go build a regular dry building.
Right.
And
lease it just fine.
Lease it fine because also you have to exponentially put X more investment in to get the freezers and coolers up, and then you have a bunch of micro units, and then what do you have, a shared it gets very confusing. So I think a lot of people it's challenging, but there's definitely still demand for it, whether it's the cruise lines or the hospitality or the restaurant business or other niche players going to supermarkets or fast food businesses and stuff like that. There's definitely a need for it, but it'll just be interesting to see, because to Mike's point, your point earlier, the cost is just outrageous.
What about sales prices? I think we're going to see sales prices in the $350 to $400 a foot range. I mean, I know that's what a lot of people are thinking, and that's some of the numbers that are getting floated around, which, by the way, is what it costs to deliver a freezer at this point. Yeah. So, those comps haven't happened yet. There haven't been trades of that level that I'm aware of, but I think they're coming, and that's something to look out for in the next year or two. So with that, I just want to say thanks to you guys. Another excellent episode about cooler and freezer space in South Florida. Tom and Mike, you guys are legendary, and that was excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Drop a comment below, subscribe, and share this with someone who you think might find it valuable. Thanks.